Jane, can you talk about the taxi initiative?
Sure. Now, TAXI stands for Trackable Asset Cross-Platform Identifier, and we made this up as an acronym to cover this whole area of content identification, meaning both creative programming content and advertising as content as well. And as we started on the cross-platform initiative, one of the problems that we came up with, and it particularly comes up in that second bucket that I talked about verifying exposure to assets as they travel across platform. Um, the way it is now is everybody has their own proprietary tag and code, and so if you want to follow an asset, you may have to, you have to work with one company and use their code or their tag. There isn't an open and interoperable standard. And so we just kept saying to ourselves, as with the UPC code, couldn't there be a UPC code for media? And so we went to, put out an RFP and talked to a bunch of different consulting firms and ended up hiring Ernst & Young. And we worked with them for the last 6 months, talking to all of the different players in this whole area of content identification and better understanding it. Um, and we're just about to put out the paper and a primer with a lot of these terms explained up on the website. Uh, and what we've found is that actually, surprisingly, the industry is very supportive of developing an open and interoperable standard. It solves a lot of problems, and not just research problems. As one company mentioned to me, there's kind of when you talk about asset identification, there's the 4 Rs, which are research, royalties, rights, and residuals. So this is something that impacts the whole media ecosystem, and we're just making, having the researchers come to the table and say how important this is for the research companies. And so there are some asset identification techniques that we're exploring. There's some companies and associations that have been developing ways to identify both content and advertising. There is Ad ID that's been developed by the 4As and the ANA for tracking ads. There's something called IDER, the Entertainment Identification Registry, that's been developed out of movie labs and cable labs and the movie studios for identifying content. And so we're evaluating all of these and trying to put them together and come up with a pilot test is what we'd like to do next, to actually test out, can we really technically do this in the media ecosystem, and what are the business benefits? We'd like to be able to more clearly lay out the business benefits for all of the senior executives in the media industry so that they can understand how important it would be for the industry to adopt this going forward. So we've basically finished our first phase, which is the feasibility study, and then we're hoping to move into a pilot test phase next.
Can you talk a little bit about how you're going to conduct the pilot test, how you'll get all these players and all these moving pieces together?
Well, we're getting a proposal put together right now, and we're talking to all of the different players. So it would involve getting a number of media companies who would be willing to test this out through their whole distribution systems. We'd have some technical partners, obviously. We'd have the asset identification partners. We also, there's the content stream, the way content flows through the programming and the network streams, and then there's also the way the ads come in and join up with the content. And so there are different agencies that we would need to get involved, some different technical providers on the agency side. So it's a complex ecosystem, and that's why we'd like to really pull together a pilot test with 2 or 3 different media companies to just show that it can be done and that it has significant financial benefits to do so. And it would really change the whole system now that we have a digital media ecosystem. it would be so much more efficient to actually be able to follow files digitally as they go through the whole system. And there are just many cost efficiencies and accuracy that will improve, to say nothing of the research benefits, that then you would have a situation where it's an open and interoperable standard. So it takes a lot of the cost out of the research companies, where they now have to spend a lot of effort trying to actually identify that content. It kind of puts that responsibility back on the content owners, and then the research vendors can spend all of their time and energy putting their secret sauce on better ways of analyzing and tracking the content.
Jane, what would you say are the criteria for making Taxi a success?
Well, this is actually what came out of the feasibility study, aside from the fact that the industry is very open, and it's almost as if it's reached a tipping point where so many people are saying that asset identification is really needed. But when you get in a little bit more into the details as to what would make it work and make it successful, and why hasn't it worked to date, why hasn't it been done so far, Ernst & Young came up with 6 success criteria out of the feasibility study. And the first is that it has to be simple. It has to be easy for everyone to adopt this, to get their content registered using these different identification registries. And it has to fit into the way that their operations are working now. It can't be something that's so far out of their current operational scheme that the challenge to changing everything would just make it too great that it wouldn't be adopted by the industry. So that was the first thing. It has to be simple to use and to launch. It has to be interoperable and open, so it has to work across different house IDs systems that different media companies and agencies may already have. It has to fit within that and adapt to that, and it can't be a closed system in order for it to really work throughout the whole ecosystem. It has to be inextricably bound, which means that the technology that you use to identify the asset has to stay with it throughout the whole media ecosystem. And that's not a small challenge, given that these files can be transcoded and decoded and moved across a lot of different distribution formats. They can be cut up and chopped up into clips and put on YouTube and sent all around the world in seconds. And so you need a solution, most likely some kind of a watermarking, some kind of a fingerprinting potentially solution that is inextricably bound to the asset. So that's part of the technical test that we'll be doing, is to actually determine which is the best way to do that. It needs to be extensible, meaning that it has to be kind of future proof, that we have to be trying to anticipate all of the ways that it could be used across the ecosystem, at least that we can imagine to date. But that if we were doing this a year ago, we would have hopefully designed it in a way that it could have worked to track an asset on the iPad. So you want to be able to think about all of the different types of distribution systems that might be coming up in the future, to make sure that it can be applied in all of these different settings. It also needs to be open and global. So, all media companies are global companies now. We need a standard that's going to be open and work all around the world. And lastly, and quite importantly, it needs to be cost effective. So it needs to be inexpensive to adopt, and it kind of goes along with being simple. It needs to be simple and cheap and easy to use, and we don't want to have a lot of big hurdles in front of the industry in order for them to adopt it.
These are very high goals to attain, important but high goals. What do you see as the chances for success and the time frame for success?
Well, you're right. It is changing the whole ecosystem. And, at first we were like, gee, do we really want to go near this? But the more we talked to people and the more we found out that really all the media companies are thinking about this and planning this on their own. All the research companies are developing their own codes and doing this on their own. All of the agencies are kind of struggling with how to move from ISKI to Ad ID and how to do this on their own. So if you really, this is what I meant by the tipping point, is that there is a need in the industry to have something like this. And because so many players are saying that there's a need, we really do think that now is the time to do it. And all we need, everyone told us this, all you need is a pilot test to show senior management that this is important, and it's going to save you money, and it's going to improve the accuracy of the whole system, because you will, in many of the, for instance, on the ad side, they have people that are rekeying by hand, the identifier for an ad, sometimes as many as 20 times from the time that that ad is created till it gets all the way through being, aired. And there's so much so much inaccuracy and error that can come in that kind of a situation. And so, and that falls through to the research. So there are times when you can't actually identify shows that ran, and you can't identify always ads that ran because of these errors that come into the system. So it would make everything much more accurate and cost effective. And so what everyone said was, do a pilot test, show that A, it's technically feasible, and that B, it will save everyone money, that there's a strong business case. And so we'll be spending the next few months pulling together the design of the pilot test, getting all the partners ready. I would expect by, into the fourth quarter, we'll have it all designed and ready to go. We may just wait until January to start it. We're just kind of working out the timing of that. But then however long it would take, 6 months to complete a test, I would hope that by this time next year we would be able to say, technically it's feasible, and we would have a few CEOs, particularly of the companies that are involved in the pilot test, willing to say, this is important, the industry should do this and move forward. And that's what you need. That's how things happen in this industry, is when the senior management understand the importance of something and tell everyone to move ahead with it.